Hello, my name is LaValle Norman, and I'm a research fellow at Australian Catholic University's Institute of Religion and Critical Inquiry. Welcome to my unglamorous home office. As you can see, it is a storage attic. My life went through a very abrupt change when the COVID crisis hit. I was on a work trip that was supposed to last for 6 months, traveling from Australia to North America and Europe. Why? In order to move between intellectual centers and to have conversations, to share my ideas, to give papers, and in particular, to teach a course at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, where I was a visiting fellow on a large project called Anchoring Innovation. Although extreme, such traveling is normal for me. Since moving to Australia 3 years ago, I've gone on international trips every 2 to 3 months. One of the reasons I felt so excited about moving to Australia for a job, a place where I have no family or personal connections, was because I knew that I would be encouraged to travel. After all, I don't really even have one home. For instance, my 8-month-old son has 3 citizenships. I've lived in many different places. I wanted to be able to continue this life of travel and conversation in person in different intellectual centers, and I had no reason to think that I wouldn't be able to do so, continue to do so forever. Well, guess again, right? Not only did I need to rush home for an emergency flight and enter strict isolation for 2 weeks, but our office has been closed now for 4 months. The rich intellectual center we have here at ACU was also beyond reach. We are currently, in fact, in Melbourne, only allowed to leave our homes for 4 essential reasons. What a change. Now I find myself feeling stuck, disappointed at the opportunities I've missed, lonely, or sometimes not alone enough, living with the same people day after day. Time has lost most of its momentum and it's hard to find things to look forward to. Like all of us, this wasn't a choice I actively made. It wasn't a lifestyle I was excited for. But I am lucky to be up here in this attic because here I get to have all kinds of conversations. My work transports me into conversations with the past as I read people who wrote long ago, and then I write about them in turn. But also via Zoom, like so many of us now, I can join in conversations. I've taken part in conferences in England and Germany that I wouldn't have been able to go to perhaps otherwise. And also our own seminar here at ACU in Biblical and Early Christian Studies has moved online. While we used to have about 20 people in the room for each of our seminars, all of whom I knew and had regular conversations with, now we have usually over 100 people. While I used to know everyone, now I only know a fraction. So recently I've been thinking about how my research in the ancient world and this modern experience of Zoom relate to one another. I've been especially intrigued by the use in Zoom of backgrounds. I don't typically use one myself, although I do often curate my background so it looks a little neater than you see right here. I have a little sheet that I drape over an old mattress and lean against the wall. Very elegant. My previous travel was based around the idea that you needed to hop between academic centers. In this, I was very much in line with the ancient period that I study. Then too, there were certain places where intellectuals gathered. Alexandria, Rome, Beirut if you were a law student, Athens. If you were a clever student from, for example, the middle of Turkey, you had to travel to one of these places for your higher education. Travel in the ancient world was always precarious. You had to rely on roads or the sea. It was expensive and it was dangerous. But in the period that I study, it suddenly became much more dangerous. The period that I work on gets its very name from how precarious things were. It's called the crisis of the 3rd century. This was a time when the Roman Empire was in serious peril, and it looked like it might not survive. So it's in the second half of the 3rd century AD. There was a huge problem with inflation. Coins started having significantly less precious metals. Prices for goods skyrocketed. There was constant wars on multiple fronts, and the wars were coming for the first time in a long time close to the centers of power. In Rome, they built huge walls around the city, something that would have seemed unnecessary in previous eras. Rome itself, could you believe that the enemy could get that close? It seemed ridiculous. But for Athens, they did get that close. The Goths besieged and sacked Athens in 267 in what is known as the Herulian invasion. And there are tales from that time of professors being dragged out into the street and beheaded. The formerly safe locations of academic conversation were silenced. And even if you wanted to get there, it was too dangerous to travel. We don't have much literature that survives from this time, and people think that it might be partly due to how bad things were. It wasn't a time when people had the leisure to be creative. The network of intellectual centers was in peril. But turns out that this wasn't only a bad thing. In the vacuum that was created, some new places that had always been on the periphery started to rise in importance. There was an opportunity. It suddenly seemed like anywhere might become the new Athens. The person that I work on lived and wrote during this difficult time. His name was Methodius of Olympus. We have no evidence that he ever managed to leave the region where he grew up on the coast of Asia Minor. In this beautiful idyllic setting. It doesn't look like too terrible of a place to be stuck, actually, until you recall that one of the main problems with this period was pirates. And also, it was a precarious time to be a Christian, which is what Methodius was. But Methodius took advantage of the destabilization of the centers of learning to advertise his own small community and the delights that it held. And how did he do that? By projecting imagined conversations out into the world. He did this by writing. So of course, not through a literal Zoom background, but through writing philosophical dialogues with himself as the star participant. He wrote how he and his friends were as interesting and intelligent as the people in Plato's dialogues, talking on the streets of Athens. The Lycian coast was just as conducive to philosophy, it turns out. And here's where we return to Zoom and to backgrounds. I think that one of the results of us being stuck where we are, sometimes unable to leave home, almost never able to congregate, is that it removes the power of intellectual centers. Even if you live in Oxford, it is, from what I hear from my friends, a ghost town. The rooms are not filled with seminars. You won't chat with professors as you get your coffee from the missing bean. But when I look through the list of people in our Zoom events, they come from all over. There are many people there who are able to participate and ask questions and engage in intellectual conversations, who for one reason or another could either not go to or not stay in intellectual centers. There's my friend who's a housewife in Arizona. There are poor graduate students, people who aren't able to typically travel all the time. But now, thanks to the fact that everyone is home, they can be part of these intellectual networks again, almost as equals. It's a great equalizer. I think of Methodius as the same, but Methodius was also a Zoom user who liked backgrounds, unlike myself. He presented where he was as an interesting place to be. If all the people could see of his hometown was what he was going to write, publish, and advertise, then he would present it in the best possible light. He would make people realize that even here on the rocky cliffs of Turkey, people were having high-level intellectual conversations, even if they could never get to Athens. So what can we learn from this? What has my Zoom experience taught me about Methodius and the crisis of the 3rd century? And what can the crisis of the 3rd century teach us about the COVID crisis of the 21st century? I want to contend that it teaches us that sometimes it's not only a negative thing when intellectual centers are destabilized. It gave me a way to rethink my frustration at having to remain in one place, to see the positive aspects of physical isolation, the equalizing aspects. It can provide opportunities for people who could never make it to the center to still participate. And it allows people in the center to hear voices that they might not otherwise be able to hear. So in my little office in the attic in the suburbs of Melbourne, I could fly away to both the ancient world and also to places around the world in the modern period. The pandemic, while it will certainly cement certain inequalities, goes a long way towards breaking down the inequalities of location. And it also has significantly reduced my carbon footprint. So, greetings from sunny Melbourne.